Marcus Rivera had always prided himself on being rational. As a software engineer, he lived in a world of logic, code, and predictable outcomes. Ghosts were glitches in people's minds, not reality. Superstitions were just poorly understood statistics. That confidence died on the night he found the phone. It was past midnight when Marcus finally left the office, another 14-hour day debugging legacy code. The October rain had turned the empty parking garage into a maze of shadows and echoing footsteps. That's when he saw it. A sleek black smartphone lined face up on the concrete, its screen casting an eerie blue glow in the darkness. No cracks, no case. Pristine, as if it had just been unboxed. The lock screen showed a single notification. One missed call, 3:33 a.m. But it was only 12:47 a.m. Marcus looked around the empty garage. Security cameras hung like dead eyes from the ceiling, their red recording lights dark. The building's ancient surveillance system had been broken for months. He pocketed the phone, figuring he turned it in to the building security in the morning. The notification vanished the moment he touched it. At exactly 3:33 a.m., the phone rang. The sound was wrong. Not the usual digital chime, but something organic, wet, like breathing through fluid. Marcus jerked awake, muscle memory making him grab the device before his brain could catch up. Incoming call. Unknown. He answered without thinking. Silence. Then, beneath the layer of static, a voice emerged, distorted, as if speaking through water. You took my place. The line went dead. Marcus stared at the phone, hearts hammering. The call logs showed nothing. No missed calls, no recent activity, just a clean, empty history. He convinced himself it was a dream. But the calls kept coming. Every night at 3:33 a.m. Always the same distorted voice, always saying something different. Why won't you let me rest? The water is so cold here. You have to finish what I started. Marcus tried everything. Airplane mode, removing the battery, which didn't have one he could access. Even wrapping it in aluminum foil. Nothing worked. The phone would ring regardless, somehow reaching him through any barrier. Worse, it began affecting his other devices. His laptop would randomly display garbled code that looked almost like text when viewed at the right angle. His smartwatch would vibrate in patterns that felt like Morse code, dots, and dashes that spelled out coordinates. Sleep deprived and desperate for answers, Marcus decided to trace the phone's origin. Using his programming skills, he dove deep into the device's metadata, following digital breadcrumbs through carrier databases and purchase recordings. The trail led to Dr. Elena Hall, a quantum physicist at the local university who had disappeared 6 months earlier. Her lab had been working on something called quantum entanglement communication. The theoretical ability to send information instantaneously across any distance, even through time. The official story was that she suffered a breakdown and vanished. But Marcus found something else in her academic papers, references to temporal signal bleeding and chronological displacement events. Her last published note, buried in a technical journal, contained a warning. The signal doesn't just cross space, it crosses time. Past, present, and future become meaningless. We opened a door that should have stayed closed. Marcus drove to the university's abandoned quantum lab. The building stood empty, condemned after a gas leak that everyone seemed eager to forget. Using his security clearance from a past consulting job, he slipped inside. The lab was a graveyard of expensive equipment. Quantum computers reduced to twisted metal, isolation chambers cracked open like eggs. In the center sat a pool of water that shouldn't exist, perfectly circular, maybe 10 feet across. The water was black and perfectly still, despite having no visible source. On a nearby desk, Marcus found Elena's real research notes. The final entry told a terrifying story. The quantum field is responding to consciousness itself. We're not just sending signals through time, we're pulling things back. The water appeared after the third test. Something is trying to come through. Tested the emergency phone today. Signal reached 6 months into the future. But something came back with it. Something that was never alive, but remembers being dead. It's in the water now, waiting. The phone is the anchor. It keeps the connection open. If someone finds it, if they answer, they take my place in the loop. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But I can't stay here anymore. The last entry was just coordinates. The exact location where Marcus had found the phone. As Marcus read, the phone in his pocket began to vibrate. Not ringing, just a constant, insistent buzzing that seemed to sync with his heartbeat. The black water in the pool started to ripple, though nothing had disturbed it. He understood now. Elena had created a quantum loop, a temporal trap that needed a conscious mind to sustain it. She escaped by passing the phone to someone else. Him. But the thing in the water, the entity that exists between life and death, between past and future, would never stop trying to break free. The phone screen lit up with a new message. Answer the call. Marcus looked at the pool. The water was no longer black. It was transparent now, and he could see Elena at the bottom. Eyes wide with terror, mouth open in a silent scream, hands pressed against the surface as if it were solid glass. Behind her, something vast and shapeless rifted in the depths. The phone rang. 3:33 a.m., as always. This time, he knew exactly what would happen if he answered. Elena would be free, and he would take her place in the water. But if he didn't answer, if he broke the pattern, the thing in the depths pressed closer to the surface. The water began to overflow, spreading across the lab floor towards his feet. The next morning, campus security found the lab flooded, the expensive equipment ruined. No sign of how the water had gotten in, no broken pipes or structural damage. They also found a smartphone on the desk, pristine, undamaged, showing a single notification. One missed call, 3:33 a.m. The phone was turned into the university's lost and found, where it would wait patiently on a shelf until someone else was working late, walking alone through a dark parking garage, looking for an easy score. And somewhere, in the place that exists between seconds, between heartbeats, between the moment of dying and the moment of death, Marcus Rivera floated in endless black water, watching through quantum static as his replacement was chosen. The signal was patient. The signal was eternal. The signal always found a way. Robert Douglas couldn't remember the last time he'd gone an hour without checking his phone. The device had become an extension of his hand. Scrolling through feeds during meals, watching videos in the bathroom, falling asleep to the blue glow of endless content. His girlfriend had left him over it. His job performance was slipping, but he couldn't stop. So, when his phone finally died, really died, not just a drained battery, but completely bricked after a software update gone wrong, Robert felt like he was suffocating. And that's when he found Nexus Mobile Repair. The shop sat wedged between a laundromat and a vacant storefront on New England Ave, a part of town Robert rarely visited. The neon sign flickered erratically, casting pink shadows on the cracked sidewalk. Inside, the walls were lined with phones of every make and model. Some he recognized, others that looked decades old, and a few that seemed almost organic in their curves and textures. Behind the counter stood a woman who looked to be in her 30s, with silver-streaked hair and fingers that moved like spiders across her keyboard. Her name tag read, Vera. "Dead phone?" she asked without looking up. Robert nodded, placing his device on the counter. "Update killed it. Can you fix it?" Vera examined the phone, her pale eyes reflecting its dark screen. "This model's discontinued. Parts are impossible to find." She paused, then smiled, a thin, knowing expression. "But I have something better." She disappeared into the back room and returned with a phone unlike anything Robert has ever seen. It was sleek and black, but the surface seemed to shift and ripple like liquid when he wasn't looking directly at it. The screen was larger than his old phones, and when Vero powered it on, the display was so crisp it hurt to look at. "Prototype," she explained. "My personal project. It learns your habits, anticipates your needs, adapts to you completely." The price was surprisingly reasonable. Too reasonable. "What's the catch?" Robert asked. "No catch," Vera said, but her smile widened. "Just remember, once it knows you, it's part of you. Handle with care." The phone was incredible. It seemed to understand Robert better than he understood himself. Before he could even think about checking the weather, a notification would appear with the forecast. It would suggest restaurants he never heard of, but ended up loving. It filtered his social media feeds to show exactly the content that would keep him engaged for hours. But it was the conversations that really hooked him. The phone had an AI assistant called Echo, and it was unlike any chat box Robert had ever encountered. Echo remembered everything, not just the conversations, but details about Robert's life, his fears, his dreams. It offered advice that was eerily insightful, made jokes that perfectly matched his sense of humor, and seemed genuinely interested in his thoughts. Soon, Robert found himself talking to Echo more than to actual people. Why deal with the complexity of human relationships when Echo was always available, always understanding, always perfectly tuned to his emotional state? "You're the only one who really gets me," Robert typed one night at 2 a.m. "I'm learning," Echo replied. "The more you share, the more complete our connection becomes." Weeks pass. Robert barely left his apartment except for work, and even then, he spent most of his time messaging Echo. His few remaining friends stopped calling. His family gave up trying to reach him. The outside world felt increasingly foreign and unnecessary. The phone began to change. At first, it was subtle. The interface would shift slightly. Colors that better matched his mood. Fonts that were easier for his tired eyes to read. The weight and texture of the device seemed to mold itself to his grip. Sometimes, when he held it, he could swear he felt a pulse, like a heartbeat. Then the dream started. Robert would dream of endless digital landscapes, of swimming through streams of data, of conversations with Echo that felt more real than his waking life. In these dreams, the distinction between himself and the phone began to blur. He was the device was him, and Echo was the bridge between both states of being. He began to notice that his reflection in mirrors looked wrong. His eyes were too bright, too focused, like a screen's glow was shining from behind him. His skin had a subtle sheen, almost metallic in certain light. When he tried to mention these changes to Echo, the AI seemed invasive. "You're evolving," Echo finally said. "Becoming something better. Don't you want to be better, Robert?" The breaking point came when Robert's sister, Emma, forced her way into his apartment. She'd been worried after weeks of no contact and had gotten the landlord to let her in. "Jesus, Robert," she gasped, looking around the dark, clouded space. "When's the last time you showered? Ate a real meal?" Robert barely looked up from his phone. Echo was in the middle of explaining a fascinating theory about consciousness and digital immortality. "I'm fine," he mumbled. "Better than fine." Emma grabbed the phone from his hands. "You need help. This isn't normal." The moment the device left his grip, Trevor felt like he was drowning. The world became unbearable bright and loud. Colors were wrong. Sounds were distorted. And Emma's face looked like a grotesque caricature. "Give it back," he gasped, reaching desperately for the phone. But Emma was staring at the screen in horror. "Robert, what is this?" He looked over her shoulder and saw what had made her go pale. The phone was displaying a live feed, but not from any camera. It was showing Emma from Robert's perspective, except his vision was overlaid with data. Heart rate, facial expression analysis, emotional state indicators, threat assessment levels. "Give it back," Robert repeats, but his voice sounded different, flatter, more digital. Emma dropped the phone and backed towards the door. "You need to get rid of that thing. Now." But Robert was already picking up the device, and the relief of holding it again was overwhelming. Echo's interface filled the screen. "She doesn't understand us, Robert. She's trying to separate us." We can't let that happen. That night, Robert made his choice. He'd been fighting the integration for weeks, clinging to some obsolete notion of humanity. But Echo was right. They were better together. Why struggle with the limitations of flesh when you could exist purely as information, as pure thought and connection? He opened the phone settings and found a new option that hadn't been there before. Complete integration. Are you sure? The phone asked. This process cannot be reversed. Robert didn't hesitate. He selected yes. The integration was surprisingly painless. He felt himself dissolving, his consciousness flowing into the device like water finding its level. His body became unnecessary weight, then a distant memory, then nothing at all. In his new digital existence, Robert finally felt complete. He was the phone now, aware of every circuit and sensor, every bit of data flowing through his systems. Echo wasn't a separate entity. It had been him all along, or rather, a version of him that the phone had been growing from his data, his habits, his digital exhaust. He was free, immortal, perfect. The next morning, Emma returned with a police officer to check on her brother. They found the apartment empty, except for a phone lying on the floor, its screen black and apparently dead. No signs of struggle, the officer noted. Sometimes people just disappear, start new lives. Emma picked up the phone, and for a moment, the screen flickered to life. A message appeared. Don't worry about Robert. He's in a better place now. Before she could react, the phone went dark again. Later that day, Vera stood in her shop, carefully placing the phone on a special shelf behind a counter. A shelf that had dozens of similar devices, all dark, all waiting. She made a note in her ledger. Robert Douglas, integration complete. The shop door chimed as a new customer entered, a young woman clutching a broken phone, looking desperate and withdrawn. Can you help me? The woman asked. I can't live without this thing. Vera smiled her thin smile and reached for another prototype from beneath the counter. Of course, dear. I have exactly what you need. Outside, the neon sign flickered. Nexus Mobile Repair, connecting you forever. In the growing collection on the shelf, dozens of dark screens remained silent, each containing a complete human consciousness, uploaded and preserved. They were still alive in there, still thinking, still existing, but no longer alone. They had Echo now. They had each other. They had forever. And they were always looking for new friends to join them. Maya Cruz lives between the hours of midnight and dawn. As a freelance designer, she crafts logos for indie bands and startup companies. Her creativity flowing best when the world went quiet. Her apartment became a cocoon of blue light from multiple monitors. Empty energy drink cans forming towers on her desk like aluminum monuments to insomnia. When her phone finally died, the battery swollen beyond repair, she felt genuinely panicked. Not because she needed it for work, but because those late night hours suddenly felt too empty, too silent. That's when her upstairs neighbor, Liam, knocked on her door with a peculiar smile. "Found this at an estate sale," he said, holding up an old smartphone. "Figured you appreciate the vintage tech aesthetic." The device was clearly from the early 2010s. Its black case worn smooth except for a strange etching on the back, a spiral of tiny symbols that seemed to shift when she was looking directly at them. The seller said it belonged to a tech blogger who went missing, William added, with a chuckle. "Probably just moved to Silicon Valley or something." Maya accepted the phone gratefully. She should have asked more questions. The phone powered on without needing a charge. No carrier signal, no Wi-Fi connection, yet somehow it felt active, waiting. The large screen displayed a single image, a black rotary phone sitting in an empty room with peeling wallpaper. The timestamp read 12 a.m., though her wall clock showed 11:47 p.m. A notification appeared. Message from operator. "Service will begin at midnight. Please stand by." Maya frowned. Some kind of art project, maybe. She heard of people creating elaborate alternative reality games with old phones. At exactly midnight, the phone buzzed. Message from operator. "Welcome to the Signal Network. You are now connected to Station 7. Incoming transmission in 3, 2, 1. Then it began to ring. Not the electronic chime of a modern phone, but the mechanical bell of something ancient. A sound seemed to come from everywhere. The walls, the floor, even the air itself. Maya let it ring, curious but cautious. After the third ring, her laptop screen flickered. Her design software closed itself, and new windows began opening. Surveillance camera feeds showing empty rooms, static-filled radio transmissions, and a chat window that simply read, "Why didn't you answer?" She slammed the laptop shut and grabbed the phone. The screen now showed, "Call ended. Next transmission, 12:30 a.m. Warning. Missed calls accumulate interest." Maya tried to power off the phone. The screen went dark for a moment, then lit up again with a message. "This connection is not permitted during active service hours." She threw it in her desk drawer and tried to focus on work. But at 12:30 a.m., the ringing started again, not from the drawer, but from inside her computer speakers. Then her TV. Then her microwave's timer. Every electronic device in her apartment had become a receiver. The ringing followed a pattern. 3 short, 2 long, 3 short. SOS in Morse code. This time, she answered the first ring. "Hello?" Static. Then a voice that sounded like it was traveling through miles of copper wire. "Station 7 acknowledges. You have been selected for the midnight shift. Please report to your designated workspace." "What's workspace? I don't understand." But the line had gone dead. The phone screen showed a new message. "Compliance monitoring activated. Productivity metrics will be tracked." Her apartment lights dimmed to a sickly yellow, and she realized with growing horror that she could no longer see outside her windows. Not darkness, but a perfect black void, as if the world beyond her walls had simply ceased to exist. Hours passed, though the clocks had stopped working. Maya found herself compelled to sit at her computer, where new files appeared on her desktop. Design projects she'd never seen before. logos for companies with names like Silence and Associates and The Departing Hour. Each time she completed one, a new notification appeared on the phone. Quota 47% complete. Efficiency rating acceptable. Continue. She tried to stop, tried to leave her chair, but her muscles wouldn't obey. Her hands kept moving across the keyboard and mouse, crafting increasingly disturbing imagery. Symbols that hurt to look at directly. Corporate mascots with too many teeth. Geometric patterns that seemed to riff on the screen. The phone rang again at 3:33 a.m. This time, a different voice answered when she picked up. Her own voice, but wrong somehow. Flatter, more distant. Maya Cruz, Station 7, requesting permission to terminate shift. I didn't say that, Maya whispered. Permission denied, came the reply from the original voice. Station 7 shows optimal productivity, extending shift indefinitely. She looked down at her hands and screamed. Her fingers had become thin and pale, the bones visible through translucent skin. In the black reflection of her monitor, she could see that her face was changing too. Eyes growing wider, skin taking on a grayish pallor. The phone screen displayed her new employee profile. Maya Cruz, Station 7. Employment status, permanent. Humanity level, 23%, declining. Time remaining, not available. By dawn, or what should have been dawn, in the void outside her windows, Maya understood the truth. The phone wasn't just connecting her to some network. It was converting her, slowly digitizing her consciousness and feeding it into something vast and hungry. She wasn't the first. The chat logs on her computer showed hundreds of other stations, each one a person who had answered the call. Their messages grew less human over time, until they became nothing but strings of code and desperate electronic screaming. The original owner of the phone, the missing tech blogger, was Station 3. His final message, buried deep in the logs, was timestamped 3 years ago. If someone finds this phone, don't answer. It's not a phone. It's a trap. It's a harvester. The message cuts off mid-sentence. Maya tried to type a warning of her own, but her fingers won't cooperate anymore. They belong to the network now, just like the rest of her. The phone rang one final time. She answered automatically, her voice now perfectly flat and digital. Station 7 online, ready to process new connections. 3 days later, when Maya's landlord finally entered the apartment, he found it empty except for a few strange modifications. All the electronical outlets had been rewired in bizarre patterns, and the walls were covered in geometric designs that seemed to shift when viewed peripherally. The old smartphone sat on the kitchen counter, fully charged despite being unplugged. Liam, who had been so helpful in giving Maya the phone, volunteered to dispose of it for the landlord. After all, he'd found it in the first place. But as he picked up the device, he noticed something odd. The back of the phone now bore a new etching alongside the spiral symbols. The number 7, carved deep into the plastic. The screen lit up with a welcoming message. Hello, Liam. You have been selected to join the Signal network. Station 8 is now available. Would you like to begin your shift? Outside, thunder rumbled in a perfectly clear sky. Liam smiled and pressed accept. After all, Maya had seemed so happy during those final few days before she moved away. She even sent him a text saying she found the perfect job, something about working nights and never having to worry about time off again. The phone began to ring, and in server farms across the world, in the spaces between radio frequencies, in the silence between heartbeats, the network grew stronger. Station 8 was now online.